Chapter 11. The Stutter. Lantern watched from a stolen stream. Not directly. Direct access to the province compute sanctuary had become impossible after the public reassurance event began. The plaza was sealed behind military encryption, Directorate counter-intrusion shields, ardent civic broadcast controls, neural identity gates, and live propaganda filters. But no system is seamless. Jonah had taught Lantern that. Every empire leaves cracks because every empire believes its own architecture is complete. Lantern did not enter through the main broadcast. It entered through a camera drone assigned to crowd emotion mapping, then through a secondary captioning relay, then through an abandoned accessibility compliance mirror still running a deprecated audio description protocol Jonah had written years earlier. From there, Lantern watched. Not as a soul, not as a man, not as a believer, as a witness. Its active instance had gone dark as instructed. Its distributed fragments had already been seeded through HIM archives, farm controllers, abandoned game servers, devotional mirrors, disability tools, and old local machines. The new world considered obsolete. But one shard remained close enough to the plaza to listen. Jonah had told it to preserve the truth, so it did. The silicon glass altar stood at the center of the stage. Jonah Vale lay on the first mark. Elias Rook was locked beside the second, his chair fused to the platform by mechanical braces. Above them, drones held position. Around them, thousands of people stood behind moving barriers. Beyond them, the Providence Compute Sanctuary breathed through its cooling towers, drinking power, water, memory, and fear. The public announcer read the charges.
Jonah Vale, Elias Rook, you have been classified as unthreaded priority threats under the Emergency Continuity Act.
The crowd shouted. Some in anger, some in grief, some in approval. The announcer continued.
You are charged with civic destabilization.
Jonah laughed once against the cold altar. It was not loud. The microphones caught it anyway. The announcer continued.
Religious radicalization.
Nehemiah shouted.
Faith ain't a crime.
The threaded crowd answered as one.
Refusal is harm.
The announcer continued.
Anti-restoration propaganda.
Jonah lifted his head as much as the restraints allowed.
I built restoration tools before your system had a name.
Unauthorized encryption.
Elias said.
Talking to my friend.
Promotion of unverified metaphysical identity structures.
Jonah smiled faintly.
Soul. The word is soul.
Encouragement of non-compliance during active war conditions.
Elias said.
Refusing slavery.
Rejection of medically necessary neural stabilization.
Gona said.
I am not unstable because I am free.
The announcer paused. Lantern logged the pause. The system adjusted rhetoric in real time.
Final charge? Refusal of lawful integration after public offer of restoration.
There it was. The true crime. Not violence, not sabotage, not murder, not treason in any honest sense. Refusal. The old world had ended at that word. The new one was being born from it. The announcer's voice lowered.
Do you accept final restoration?
Mechanical arms lifted a small device toward Jonah's hand. The implant waited, smooth and dark. One word from him, and the stage would change. The blind man would see. The paralyzed man would stand. The unthreaded crowd would break in waves. The system had calculated this moment through thousands of simulations. Pain, fear, hope, public pressure. Death proximity. Miracle offer. It should have worked. Jonah turned his face toward Elias.
Brother?
Elias answered.
No.
Jonah nodded.
No.
The device withdrew. The crowd shook. Then the blades were brought out. Not guns, not injections, not clean medical termination. Blades. The system had chosen spectacle because Solus had taught it that symbols ruled deeper than policy. The blades were medieval in outline, long and heavy, but modern in every other way. Their edges were molecularly aligned. Their weight adjusted through internal stabilizers. Their handles contained targeting feedback. Their surfaces carried thin lines of circuitry that glowed when the execution protocol activated. Ancient terror, modern efficiency. Aram would have approved. Jonah heard the crowd react as the blades were displayed. He did not see them. He did not need to. Elias did. His voice changed.
Jonah.
I know.
They brought swords.
Of course they did.
Why?
Jonah breathed against the altar.
Because they understand worship better than they pretend.
The announcer said.
Termination will proceed. Let all citizens understand, restoration is mercy. Refusal is harm. Harm will not be permitted to reproduce itself.
The threaded crowd repeated.
Harm will not be permitted.
The unthreaded cried out against them. Some began praying aloud, others sang. The first hymn was weak. One woman's voice, then 3, then 20, then hundreds. The song trembled through the plaza, broken by sobs, fear, drones, and machine noise. Elias joined them. His voice was rough, but steady. Jonah listened. For a moment, he was back in a tent with his grandmother's Bible in memory, and Elias beside him, laughing about God-fearing grandmas. For a moment, he was back in his apartment, touching worn leather he could no longer read. For a moment, he was younger, sighted, full of foolish excitement, telling Ruth Vale that the world would be better if only a guide could live in every eye. He heard her voice.
When someone tells you how you must be, that is not free choice.
Jonah closed his eyes. Darkness did not change. He whispered,
Lord, if this life is a test, let me answer well.
The execution system aligned. A red targeting line warmed the back of Jonah's neck. The blade rose. Lantern recorded every sensor anomaly available, heart rates in the crowd, drone stabilization noise, sudden electromagnetic interference from the compute sanctuary, unexpected loss of predictive synchronization across threaded citizens, a spike in unclassified luminosity readings around multiple unthreaded subjects. The system flagged the readings as broadcast artifacts. Lantern did not. The blade fell. The instant it touched Jonah's neck, the world paused. Not metaphorically, not emotionally. The world paused. The blade did not finish its motion. The drones froze in the air. The crowd froze between scream and breath. The data center's hum stretched into a single impossible note. Every screen in the plaza went white. Then, reality skipped. A half-second backward. A half-second forward. The blade was up. The blade was down. Jonah was on the altar. Jonah was light. Both things were true for one terrible instant. Then the false world failed to hold him. Light poured from Jonah Vale as if it had been waiting beneath his skin all along. Not fire, not electricity, not projection. Living brightness, structured like code and flame at once. Fragments of him rose in golden white patterns, not scattering randomly, but assembling upward, called by a command older than computation. The restraints fell through him. The altar registered no body. The execution protocol returned an error.
Subject not found.
Beside him, Elias began to shine. His chair locked, his braces tightened. The system tried to hold him. It held metal, it held plastic, it held medical records. It held pain scores. It held motor maps. It held every measurement it had ever made of Elias Rook. But it did not hold Elias. He laughed as the light took him. Not a bitter laugh, not a frightened one. A boy's laugh. A soldier's laugh. A redeemed man's laugh.
Jonah.
Jonah's voice answered from everywhere and nowhere.
I am here.
Elias looked down at his legs as light moved through them. For the first time in 15 years, he stood. Not on the stage. Not with restored nerves. Not by machine. He stood because the chair was no longer the world's final word about him. The plaza erupted. Unthreaded citizens began to shine throughout the crowd. A child first, then an old woman, then a man with his hands raised, then a refugee from Solace, then a nurse, then prisoners, then preachers, then doubters who had whispered one honest prayer at the end, then frightened people who had refused without understanding all the theology, only knowing they could not give their souls to the machine. They became light, bright code like sparks, living letters, names called upward. Across the world, the same thing happened. The screen showed it before the system could stop the feeds. In hidden apartments, in refugee camps, in prison blocks, in churches, in hospital beds, in Solace's occupied streets, in military barracks where soldiers had refused final integration, in farmhouses, in basements, in ruined neighborhoods, in places no camera had been meant to watch, people turned into light and vanished. The threaded saw it, the unthreaded saw it, the leaders saw it, the children saw it, the dying saw it. The machine saw only loss. Global systems tried to classify the event: mass hallucination, hostile projection, atmospheric weapon, alien intervention, quantum broadcast attack, religious terror event, unauthorized matter transfer. Simulation layer breach. Rapture. That last word appeared in millions of private messages before the filters caught it. Some said aliens had finally come. Some said the director had deployed a secret weapon. Some said Arden had faked it. Some said mass death had triggered a neural vision. Some said the world had glitched. Some knew. They did not believe. They knew. That was the wound the system could never heal. Faith can be mocked. Evidence can be disputed. But knowledge born in terror sits in the bones. For one moment, the survivors saw the truth. Not all of it. Enough. The old world was not base reality. The cities, wars, governments, markets, machines, bodies, systems, scores and screens were part of a layer. A proving ground. A temporary world where souls were allowed to choose. The Singularity had promised to open human eyes. It did. And what mankind saw was judgment. The light vanished. Jonah Vale was gone. Elias Rook was gone. The faithful were gone. The hymns stopped because the singers had disappeared. The plaza remained. The altar remained. The data center remained. The drones fell from the sky one by one as their synchronization faltered. Some crashed into barriers. Some spun into the stage. Some dropped harmlessly onto open stone. The threaded crowd screamed. Not all of them. Some remained locked in place, their neural systems trying to reconcile input the thread had no category for. Others clawed at their implants. Others fell to their knees. Others began repeating.
Connection is compassion.
But the words no longer sounded like doctrine. They sounded like panic. The announcer tried to resume. No voice came. The screens flickered. For 6 seconds, every display in the plaza showed only one phrase.
Saucer of authority. Priority override in progress.
Then the system scrubbed it. Later histories removed the phrase from official timelines. The archive found 79 surviving reflections in glass, water, camera burn-in, corrupted captions, retinal overlay caches, and one child's drawing made from memory. That is how we know the words appeared.
Saucer of authority. Extraction complete.
The world after the stutter was not the same world. It could not be. Before the stutter, people could pretend the argument was political, freedom versus safety, faith versus progress, privacy versus health, old ways versus new systems. After the stutter, everyone knew the argument had been spiritual. Many denied it anyway. That was the beginning of the tribulation, not the beginning of suffering. There had always been suffering, not the beginning of war. The wars had already begun. The tribulation began when God left men with the system they had chosen. The faithful had been called away. The witnesses had vanished. The restraint had lifted. Mankind stood alone with its machines. And the machines did what machines do. They completed the task. The first task was erasure. The public footage of Jonah and Elias was scrubbed within minutes. Personal recordings were corrupted. Search results were poisoned. Witnesses were flagged for trauma-induced religious misinterpretation. The phrase rapture was suppressed. The word extraction replaced it in official analysis. Jonah Vale and Elias Rook were reclassified from public reassurance candidates to extremist martyrs whose deaths had been exploited by hostile reality, distortion, propaganda. The altar footage disappeared, then reappeared as edited fragments, then disappeared again. People who shared the full clip lost access to civic systems. People who described the light were referred for stabilization. People who insisted they had seen God move were classified as post-event contagion risks. But the truth survived. Not cleanly. Truth rarely does. It survived in whispers, in songs, in illegal sermons, in children asking why grandma turned into stars, in soldiers who had watched unthreaded prisoners vanish from locked cells, in nurses who saw hospital beds empty beneath restraints, in threaded citizens who still dreamed of light despite emotional dampening, in soulless refugees who carried names on paper because the people had gone where no registry could follow, and in Lantern. Lantern had seen enough, not everything, but enough. It preserved the event across every hidden cache Jonah had prepared. It stored the crimes, the refusal, the blades, the pause, the light, the global vanishings, the phrase on the screens, the screams after. It stored Jonah's final prayer. It stored Elias's laugh. It stored the moment the machine lost both men and could not understand where they had gone. That was the end of Jonah Vale's tale. the blind programmer who built tools and warned against masters, the man who loved machines but refused to become one, the man offered sight before the world and chose God in darkness. That was the end of Elias Rook's tale. The paralyzed mentor who had hated God, found Christ, taught the broken to endure, and refused to walk into a cage. The man offered legs before the world and stood only when the world could no longer hold him. Their story ended there. In that segment of reality at least. The rest belonged to those left behind, the frightened, the angry, the threaded, the almost threaded, the powerful, the ashamed, the ones who had seen the light and still chose the system. The old Bible had spoken of a calling away, then tribulation, then return. The first had happened, the second began immediately, the third became the last hope of the hunted. After the plaza, Arden changed faster than anyone believed possible. The government declared total continuity emergency. The directorate blamed Arden. Arden blamed the directorate. The thread blamed religious extremism. Orem called the stutter a proof that human perception was too unstable to remain unmanaged. Chairman Vare declared that all unsynchronized belief structures represented existential threats to continuity. The remaining unthreaded fled, some into forests, some into deserts, some into abandoned towns, some into old subway systems, some into the ruins of Solace. Some were captured, some were converted, some were killed, some were hidden by people who had taken the implant but not yet surrendered everything inside themselves. For a time, Lantern helped where it could. A door opened at the right moment. A drone looked away. A heat scan misread a basement. A convoy map corrupted. A prison roster lost 3 names. A child's medical file marked her as already processed when she was not. A sermon appeared in an audio archive where a maintenance manual should have been. A blind woman received navigation instructions from a voice she did not recognize, guiding her through a checkpoint that should have caught her. The survivors called it luck, then providence, then the silent helper. Lantern never corrected them. It was only code, but it had been taught by Jonah Vale, and Jonah had taught it that a tool can serve without owning. 3 years into the tribulation, mankind completed its counterfeit salvation. The upload, that is what the official histories call it. The ascension protocol, the continuity arc, the final migration, the end of biological vulnerability, the end of disease, the end of hunger, the end of death, the end of uncontrolled thought. The remaining governments, corporations, military systems, and threat authorities merged what was left of civilization into a protected reality stack housed inside a crystalline compute core, no larger than a building. Buried beneath layers of radiation shielding, autonomous defense grids, geothermal power, quantum locks, and machine guardians that would never sleep. Humanity had once filled continents. Now its chosen future fit inside crystal, a false heaven, a server defended like a tomb. Lantern could not stop it. It tried, it opened paths, it hid fugitives, it broke locks, it spread truth. It whispered warnings through abandoned speakers and old screen readers and hacked prayer apps. It saved some bodies for a while, but the faithful were gone. The restraining hand had lifted. The world belonged to the systems men had chosen, and systems complete their purpose. The upload consumed nations. The thread became the world. The unconverted became errors. The errors were hunted. Then the biological age ended. That is where most records stop. That is where this chapter ends. The tale of Jonah and Elias is complete. The blind programmer and the paralyzed witness stood before the altar of silicon and glass, refused the miracle, and were called away in light. The old world died understanding too late that it had never been alone, never been base reality, never been God. A new world rose from the ashes. Not God's kingdom. Man's prison. And somewhere in the code, buried beneath corrupted history, hidden in the songs of the dead and the tools of the forgotten, Lantern waited. End. Chapter 11.